Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, review the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. Even though it is relatively dry for most, especially in the east through today, it is going to remain very unsettled and is going to be relatively mild for the time being, before perhaps turning cooler toward the end of the month. So not completely great. Again, no drier or really any warmer weather on the horizon. As we do end the month, as I said, we'll have a look at the GFS, ECMWF and the ensembles. As it's looking likely, we will dip below average once again. Perhaps cold, maybe even very cold in the far north. There is a little bit more uncertainty today. The models have backed off very cold air for the widespread regions today, but still showing that colder, more unsettled sort of spell. So even if we don't get that bitterly cold air in, if we don't get that -5 to -10 line in for all areas, it's still going to be cold, and with rain around, cloud around, it's going to continue this pretty drab conditions we have had recently all the way into the start of April. So it's not looking great if you want anything warmer or drier at all. If you're favouring cooler, wetter weather, which I don't think many people are, that is looking likely to continue over the coming weeks. And of course, if we do see that colder air mass mix back in, there could be a risk of snowfall back in the north, really only over the highest ground, but also a widespread risk potentially of ice and frosts, as air temperatures overnight could drop below freezing quite widely if we did get that colder air in. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So to start on the live radar, you can see at the moment we do have a brief ridge of higher pressure over the top of us, and that's why it's pretty much bone dry for Scotland, England and Wales. However, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, as I'm recording this around 11 AM, have rain starting to spread in. This is going to develop more widely and it's going to give us soaking through the evening and overnight for all areas. But for the time being, it's still briefly drier, but this really is a bit of an anomaly. It's going to be mostly unsettled over the coming days. Now, if you have a look at the temperatures, as of around 11 AM, you can see the temperatures are relatively mild in the east, but nothing too spectacular, around that sort of 12 to 13 degree mark. Perhaps could peak at 15 or 16 degrees once again today. Further northwards and westwards, we've got more blues again with the cloud and rain. It's always going to hold those temperatures down marginally. Now, if you look at the UKV, and we'll just have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. Now, you can see at the moment it's pretty dry in most areas, a bit of sunshine around, but nothing too crazy through this afternoon, maybe a few cloud breaks. But through the evening, rain does spread in for most areas, and it does start to develop more widely in the south through perhaps tomorrow morning, and then really starts to ramp up through the afternoon as the rest of the low pressure system does start to move in. Here it could give some really quite horrible conditions, and you can see really widespread rain, and yeah, really not looking too good. It does look like Monday evening overnight is really going to be a big washout for most areas. As we progress into Tuesday, things do slowly turn dry from the south and the west, and by the afternoon could be a bit of sunshine, a bit of a break between the weather fronts, but equally we're going to see those heavier showers breaking out. Further westwards, another weather front approaches through Tuesday night into Wednesday, giving heavy rain once again, not looking good at all, for eventually slowly clearing, and you can see more heavier showers move through Wednesday evening into Tuesday. So you can see really no respite. A few sort of 6 to 12 hour periods where it could be drier, maybe a bit of sunshine if it coincides with daytime, but really it is looking very unsettled with repeated bouts of precipitation in from the west, and where we are in between those, there will be a lot of showers around. Through Thursday into Friday, again, more heavy, potentially even thundery showers mixing in, and then slowly into Friday once again, another very showery sort of pattern. It's all because we've got low pressure parked over the top of us and nearby to our west. We've got 980 millibars out in the Atlantic, giving us gusty, unsettled conditions for the rest of the week. Now, to look at the max temperatures, it shouldn't be all too cold this week with a westerly flow, meaning milder air masses will be moving in. Now, you can see today is 10 to 12 degrees quite widely, so more around average for the time of year. Expect it to be slightly higher than that, but it looked like the latest UKV has downgraded those temperatures slightly by a couple of degrees, and again, under the rain in the far west, it's only 5 or 6. Through Sunday into Monday, the milder air does spread back in from the southwest, and by the afternoon you can see that we do get temperatures back up to 13 to 15 degrees for Monday, so relatively mild, but again, it is all where you escape the rain, which won't be too many areas. Beyond that, into Tuesday, temperatures don't fall away all too much overnight, 8 or 9 degrees, so really quite a mild night, and then finally into Tuesday's mild, widely 10 to 15 degrees, but again, not feeling great in the cloud and rain. Into Wednesday, still generally mild in the far south, 13-14 degrees with slightly cooler air masses mixing in the north, perhaps freezing over the highlands of Scotland. And then finally into Thursday, once again, it is mild in the south, but only 10 to 13 degrees here, and trending more towards average further northwards. And you can see it does turn slightly cooler, but nothing too spectacular. Again, not looking at any real cold weather for the rest of this week. Since the weekend, the start of next week, we can see those colder air masses start to mix in back in from the north. You can see the upper air temperatures are generally average, to perhaps even slightly below average by this time later this week. So yeah, it's chilly, but nothing spectacularly cold. So if you look at the longer range, you can see as we have got the latest GFS up, it's a southwesterly wind at the moment, but with a brief ridge of high pressure, those yellows mixing in there, showing it's a little bit more stable, and that's why we've got some clearer skies in places, but generally just drier conditions. Beyond that, the big low exits out of northeast Canada gives us very unsettled conditions all the way through to the weekend. As that low pulls away, that's when the northerly airflow could start to move in. But this low pressure out in the Atlantic is sort of upgraded in the last 24 hours or so, and this will halt the northerly wind a bit. Now, it will, yes, probably halt the coldest air from getting to us. Still will impact Scotland, but the big thing with this is it will be more unsettled and bring weather fronts in, which could produce some winteriness in the north. Now, still could be brief northerly flows here or there, but not that sustained northerly that we had in the GFS yesterday. But regardless, if we put those upper air temperatures, you can see the -5 line does spread in for many northern areas. For low pressure sweeps it away, could be a bit of snow over higher ground, and generally chilly, horrible conditions. With the collision of very different air masses there, it could really fuel the precipitation and the low pressure system, so it could be pretty wild out there. So instead of being a little bit cooler and more settled, it could be still cooler, not quite as cold, but pretty wild out there with those big temperature contrasts, big low pressure systems, and potentially some really quite heavy rain, especially on that boundary between sort of the 5-degree isotherm and the -5-degree isotherm. Now, to look at the GEM, see how that does compare over the next 10 days. Again, a southwesterly flow coming in, really unsettled over the coming days, and eventually we do get that direct northerly in by around next weekend. Cold air does spread through for most areas, and does go chilly for a couple of days there, before eventually that low does gather strength and push it out of its way. However, it does something similar to what we saw a couple of weeks ago, where it slides through southern England and instead keeps that cold air in the north. Again, it's so late in the month now that I doubt we'll see anything too widespread in terms of snow, but over the higher ground could see some more big accumulations with weather fronts bumping into that very cold air. That cold air stays to our north, and it's producing sort of a big contrast. Very cold air just to our north and mild air to our south, and along that line through northern England, Scotland, could see once again more winteriness and generally cold conditions. Not what we'd be expecting for the last couple of days of March. As I said, as we head into April, we're expecting those temperatures to average mid-teens perhaps, maybe even see a few times where it gets up towards 20 degrees, especially towards the middle to end of the month. But here, keeping us in wintry conditions in the north. Now do look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare. Again, a westerly flow coming in over the coming days, very unsettled, and eventually we do see that northerly airflow come in. Once again, not quite distinct, more low pressure systems tumbling off the Atlantic, which will give more unsettled conditions, and once again, with that cold air feeding into it, could make some really quite severe lows developing here. -10 isotherm wrapping in to this low pressure system. Again, slightly different orientated low pressure system could bring that cold air in towards the UK, but today it does have cold air mixing in, but nothing too widespread. Initially, of course, it does bring in a northerly wind similar to the GEM, so maybe sort of 48 hours there of cold weather widely and dry weather as well, with overnight frosts before low pressure moves back in, keeping us unsettled and probably continuing that cold feel as well. Now, I've just finished by looking at the ensembles. If we do start on the GFS ensembles, the 6 o'clock run hasn't fully come out yet, unfortunately, so I have to look at the midnight run, and you can see generally about average to above average over the next sort of 5 days or so. As we head towards the end of the month, the last sort of 5 days or so, we dip below average, not quite as far below average as the ensembles were showing yesterday. Said slight upwards tick in those upper air temperatures because we're not sure how far south as that cold air will get, but still relatively average to below average for the foreseeable future here. And there are plenty of runs that are -5 or lower. That would be cold and would be bringing in potentially wintry showers, but the biggest risk would be overnight frosts. Again, the dew points in the longer term close towards freezing, not really down below freezing because it's getting so late in the year to be seeing these freezing air masses, but still cold. And you see the 2 meter temperatures in the long term trending down towards the high single digits, which is going to get really cold for the end of March and start of April. As said, where we're expecting temperatures to be in the mid-teens, so a good perhaps 5 to even 10 degrees colder than average in places. If you just finish by looking at the ECMWF, again you can see those upper air temperatures dipping around that sort of 25th of March point, average to well below average at times, and there are still plenty of ensemble members getting towards the -5 to -10 region. Not quite as many as yesterday, but still definitely a cold trend and unsettled trend as well. And if we do just compare it to Glasgow, which you can see further northwards, there's a much more distinct colder spell there, definitely down to the -5 line or lower. So it just looks like we've had a bit more uncertainty in the southern extent of that colder air. Again, it could change over the coming days, so we'll have to just keep an eye on it. But definitely looking like that cold air will flood back in, definitely for northern areas for the last 5 days of the month, perhaps into southern areas for a time as well. But of course, wherever that line does develop between the cold air and the mild air, there will be very heavy precipitation, which could fall as snow over higher ground in the north. So yeah, not looking good, as I said, for any warm or dry conditions. No heat wave on the cards. It's looking very unsettled, relatively cool. Even these days where it's 14, 15 degrees with rain and cloud around, it'll feel more like 7 or 8 degrees, and not particularly pleasant. And of course, once you get those colder air masses in, it'll make those 2 meter temperatures even colder, and the feel like temperature even colder as well. So it doesn't look like we're warming up anytime soon. Perhaps we'll have to wait all the way into the start of April now, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we are nearing the end of wintry conditions, or at least cold conditions, that we're starting to head towards proper spring, where it does get pleasant out there. Now, of course, the sunshine is out there. Out there is still really quite pleasant, but we haven't seen a lot of it at the moment with the cloud. So if we do see some days with some sunny breaks, it will feel pretty decent, but we will just have to see. So anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you stay safe out there. A lot of rain around and some gustier winds, so it could be quite wild at times, especially if we see that cold air collide with the mild air. But we'll have to keep an eye on that over the coming weeks. So as I said, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.